Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for meeting with us today. I'm Amanda Leah, and I'm psyched to introduce a true contribution to the carnivore community. She's big on protein and not such a fan of anti-meat propaganda. She's healing obesity and athletes and military combat operators and ex-vegans alike. She was mentored by Don Layman, and she's married to a Navy SEAL. And she's taking muscle-centered medicine to the masses. So she's fit and fabulous, and she's a new mom to an active little girl. Thanks so much for joining us, Dr. Gabrielle Lyon.
Thank you so much. This is a really important conversation. I'm so glad to be here with a group of women. I mean, that's really profound and important, and I can't wait to just have an open conversation and share a little bit about my journey. It's interesting because carnivore, well, maybe I should tell you a little bit about myself first. My name is Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, and I'm a physician. I trained for about 17 years, which is a long time. It's gross. My undergraduate degree was in human nutrition, vitamin, mineral metabolism. And that's where I trained under Dr. Donald Layman, who, if you guys are really into science and research, and, Sean Baker definitely knows Don, has had Don on his podcast. He's one of the world leading protein experts. Why I mention that is because it really changed my view of medicine when it comes to seeing what is important, what is valuable, what is viable for humanity, for women, men alike. So I trained under him at University of Illinois. Then I went to medical school. After medical school, I did that in Arizona. Then after medical school, I went to psychiatry residency for 2 years, then family medicine. Then I did a postdoc, which is a specialty fellowship training at Washington University in obesity medicine and geriatrics. And I did that in nutritional sciences. So the journey has been long, and it's been very worth it. One of the reasons that I studied for so long is because having seen so much lends to credibility and experience, both which are valuable, especially in particular in a space that is flooded with propaganda. Propaganda that I see, propaganda that has killed people, right? Because, it's one thing to be a blogger in the health space, and it's another to actually be at the bedside of dying individuals, which has been my experience. So that really developed this concept called muscle-centric medicine, which is muscle is the largest organ in the body. It's the organ of longevity. We often think of it for aesthetics. It's not. It's not just aesthetics and locomotion. It truly is an endocrine organ. So this is a very long-winded way of saying of why that matters. Well, muscle is fed by protein. In ancient Chinese medicine, like feeds like. You're not going to build strong muscle on a lot of plants. It's going to be really hard. It's going to be calorically expensive. So this started about 17 years ago, where high protein, not even high protein, optimal protein led me on this path. And this path, unbeknownst to me, is largely carnivore and has become largely carnivore, not for any other reason that by seeing what works. So I can share a little bit about my trajectory. I certainly don't want this to be a monologue, but,
No, we'd love to hear you. That's awesome. Already everything you've shared is so exciting, but we'd love you to continue,
okay.
Please.
So really, like I said, I started with Donald Layman at the University of Illinois. And at that time, I was doing fitness figure competitions. I'd been a swimsuit model over the course of 10 years, over a decade. And like a lot of people out there, I tried a lot of different nutrition plans. And it was really the low-fat, lean meats. Calorie control was certainly an issue. And what it ended up creating was a lot of body dysmorphia, a lot of struggle with, keeping weight off, weight cycling. It was very detrimental and dangerous. And I'm sure everyone listening has been at some point. I think you guys have all been there, right? You've all struggled with your weight. You've all tried everything. I see heads shaking. You've all had the experience where you've gone on a bodybuilding fitness diet and still felt not great. And even if you were able to get lean, it kind of feeds this eating disorder or this disordered eating, this kind of body dysmorphia. And that was really the beginning. And I don't think I've ever really talked about that. But as I was thinking about before, I thought it would be great to share with this community, that experience, because this is the meaningful conversation, right? We can talk about science, which is also very valuable, but personal experience and anecdote, personal anecdote is very powerful. It's a powerful mover. So, for years I struggled with trying to control my calories, which I do. I mean, that definitely makes for a better body composition, but the struggle was inordinate, right? It was just massive. So I tried different things, a lot of fiber, a lot of artificial sweeteners. I did a lot of stuff. And I found that not much worked. So fast forward to, a lot of training, a lot of residency, a lot of experience. And what I found worked for me, and this probably started about 5 years ago, where I found that I felt the best on ground beef. Weird, right? So this was at the time, no one's really talking about carnivore, and people were talking about keto, which I tried. I was very unsuccessful at keto. I put on weight. I tried, unbeknownst to me, a carnivore diet that was largely chicken. Also didn't work, which is interesting. So for my personal eating habits, I switched over to ground bison, lower fiber. And when I say lower fiber, I mean I used what we would consider nutrient-dense additives. So cilantro and jalapeno and powders, which is actually what I do to this day. So if I were to fast forward that to what I have been able to do and remain relatively lean without even thinking about it. And when I say relatively lean, I would say before I was pregnant, my body fat percent was 14, which, some of you might not say, oh, that's not super lean, but it's pretty lean when you think about the span of how lean a person can be without really putting in a ton of effort and starvation. So my typical diet is now around my body weight in protein, maybe a little bit more. So it's about 150 grams. I'm 130 pounds, a little less, about 150 grams of protein. And I feel best on ground bison I add personally a little bit of jalapeno or cilantro. And green coffee. We can talk about this. There's, I think for women, additives that I've found to be helpful in maintaining body weight. Again, it is based on caloric intake, and having a more carnivore style diet for me, I've been able to control calories without the push, right? Without the struggle. And I think that, there's struggle is really important in life because you get better based on struggle. We can all say that effort, when you put an effort in things, it's very valuable. I found that to be true. And then on one aspect, when you're thinking about what you can do for a lifetime to maintain, you struggle up into a point, and then there should be some easefulness. So I truly do believe that. So that was a lot of talking, but.
So much. I'm so excited to hear about this green coffee, to be honest. One of my questions for you was all about what your stance was on fiber, because I watched your interview with Dr. Sean Baker, and you had asked him about fiber, and then I thought, I want to hear what you think, and you just kind of touched on it. So can you tell us more about this green?
Yeah, I feel very torn. So there is good evidence. It's interesting. I feel torn about this. Personally, for me, I'm going to take a step back. Here's what I think really happens. I think that our individual genetics and microbiome make up everything. I think that we have to figure out what that plan is for us, right? I have friends that are vegan and vegetarian that have done phenomenal. It's probably about 2% of the population, which is not many. But those individuals actually thrive. And then I think there's another subset of people that will thrive eating a carnivore style way. And I think it's based on the microbiome. I think it's based on things that we don't necessarily know. So for me personally, the jury's out for me on fiber. I personally am not a big fan in my own life, but that doesn't mean that it's not great for some people, because some people it seems to be that way. But in terms of the evidence, I'm not convinced. I'm not really sure. I'm not convinced.
I hear you, definitely hear you on that. I definitely got a lot of recommendations to eat more fiber and found that was actually making me worse and all my conditions worse. So lessening it has helped. But what are the ingredients that you put in your green coffee?
So I think this is really important for everyone to try. And I'm telling you, I think that I have figured out a really great formula I'm 5 months postpartum, and I've lost the majority of the baby weight, which is interesting. And one of the things that I add in is green coffee. And I use this company called Sun Up. I have no financial ties to them. It's called Sun Up Green Coffee. It tastes, in fact, I'm drinking some now, which I shouldn't be, but it's Super Bowl. And there's some gelatin in there, so it's really gross. But Sun Up Green Coffee, it's raw, green, unprocessed coffee. And there's a component in it called chlorogenic acid. And the chlorogenic acid helps with fatty acid metabolism. And it doesn't taste like coffee. It's interesting. It tastes a little bit like tea, but if you can get past the taste in that way, I think it's a fantastic supplement into your nutrition. Really, I would recommend you guys all just invest in one case, try it, get 6 and see how you feel. You definitely get a huge buzz. And it's interesting because the jury is out for me on polyphenols. I don't think that we need them all year round. And there's a high amount of polyphenols without the fiber. So when we're thinking about it, and I think for men and women, it's different. And, carnivore, the concept is new in terms of experience it for women. And what I believe, right, and this, I feel very strongly, I feel like we're going to have a modified version that so guys are going to be able to do one way. And I think us women, I think that we'll benefit from doing it slightly different. And this is what I'm experimenting with right now. And I have a book coming out in be a year, but.
Oh, that's awesome. Great. So we'll look forward to that.
Yeah. So I'm experimenting with it now. So I think it's great for women to get polyphenols. And again, this is all anecdote. I don't have science to back this up. I can only tell you from seeing, hundreds and hundreds of people in my clinic, what works. So a low fiber, but still high polyphenols and certain compounds can be beneficial. And the one way to do it is you're not getting any extra sugar, any extra calories from green coffee. It's just like green tea.
That makes a lot of sense. Thanks for introducing us to that.
I think you guys will like it. And I'd love to hear your feedback. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on it. I think it's incredible.
Excellent. One of the questions I had for you after I was looking on your Instagram, as I do follow you, and you mentioned something about carbicide, which is such a term. And I thought maybe you could explain to us all how someone would know, although maybe none of us are anymore, but how is someone committing carbicide?
That's a great question. So the body has an obligatory carbohydrate need, but that doesn't mean we have to ingest carbohydrates to get that. So for example, for me, my carbohydrate intake is nearly 0. The majority of my food is protein, and the protein that you ingest is gluconeogenic, so it makes actually carbohydrates. So there's an obligatory carbohydrate need, and that's around 90 grams. And the rest you have to earn. If you're going to ingest carbohydrates, the rest you have to earn. But you don't actually need to eat carbs for your body to generate glucose. For example, for every 100 grams of protein that you eat, you'll make 60 grams of carbohydrates. That's it. The concept that we need carbohydrates is totally false. The body can generate everything that it needs. And when you look at the blood work, what does that look like? Well, your hemoglobin A1C will be higher because your red blood cells live longer. Your fasting insulin will be lower. And it's definitely a way to control insulin. And it's very hard to overeat protein. It's very hard. So yes, so that's, so carbicide. So when people tell you, oh, you need carbs, I would say that's the kiss of death. I would say you have to know your body. And I think everyone here in this group has determined that they don't do well on carbohydrates. And I've personally found that myself. The carbohydrates, you can get all the carbohydrates you need from protein. Your body will make what it needs.
It's so this great. Is kind of funny, sorry, but living in Europe, in Eastern Europe, when you read on the packages, like what the nutrition is for everything, it's glucoside for sugars. So I'm always like, don't commit glucoside to my family. I'm like, don't commit glucoside. Like, check that label.
Yeah, it's true. We don't need it, and it's so interesting unraveling the propaganda. The propaganda is so deep. The guidelines were made by largely vegetarian groups. It's, it's deep. It's really, really deep. The propaganda is deep. And it's interesting for the views that we have. the answer, the media answer is to shame, to shut us up. I mean, someone posted me that I was funded by the meat industry, clearly. And it's interesting because individuals, we live in a free country. We should be able to have our own views, right? But it seems that it's so radical for people that they try to shut you up. And you women may experience that. And just gonna have to brush it off.
Yeah.
There's always going to have to be rebels. There's always going to have to be trailblazers. And that's the reality. And you're going to have to fight for what you believe.
Absolutely. It's so great that you brought that up and that you're touching on that, because there's just so much out there saying the opposite. And even though we have a personal experience, it's good to be reinforced. Another thing you mentioned recently that would be really great, we were just talking about it at the beginning of this meeting amongst us, about what it is like to menstruate now on this way of eating. And also because you just had a baby, we'd love to hear more about, your experience before getting pregnant, during the pregnancy, after everything, if you're open.
Yeah, I'd love to share. To have a beautiful 5-month-old. Who knows? She might make a special appearance. And I actually had a very interesting pregnancy. I was sick for 10 months. So I had nausea and vomiting pretty severely for 10 months. And during that 10 months, I was on a much lower protein diet than I have ever eaten. It was impossible for me. So it was interesting to, whether I didn't feel great because I was pregnant or I didn't feel great because I was having a lot of carbs, which was literally all I could get in. The beginning of that, when I had to switch from eating protein, I got very swollen. I had autoimmune stuff happening. I had thyroid antibody stuff I've never had before from adding in more processed carbohydrates. As soon as I took them off, as soon as I took that out, those went away. So that was a really interesting experience. So it's a self-experience and a self-experiment. Pregnancy was really tough. I trained throughout it. Muscle mass is really important. So I continued to do as heavy lifting as I could, a lot of kettlebells, a lot of movements like that. And postpartum, I pretty much went right back to eating the way that I did, and which is largely red meat. And that's the truth. I'm not super public about it. I am more and more now, because I think that the world needs to hear some kind of balance, because if I don't speak up, then you guys are going to struggle. I mean, not that my speaking up is going to make the struggle better, but there has to be some women in the field that truly are telling their experience. So now it's really back to meats, and that's how I feel best.
That's amazing. And we're so grateful that you're speaking out, because even though we experience it, it's so important for us to continue this conversation and to have educated doctors like yourself. Is perfect. Sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, no, it froze. So I missed the last part. But.
Oh, okay. Got it. Sorry. No, yeah, we're just very grateful that you speak out and that you are sharing your story, although we understand why you're hesitant to say it.
I mean, not so much anymore because it's so ridiculous, but.
It's true. It is picking up a bit more. So it is a little more comfortable to say these things out loud, I guess.
It's more important now than ever, And what I found is that, the zealot groups do it wrong. So if you really want people to understand your point of view, you don't need to bash them. You don't need to go on their obviously you guys aren't doing that. But, from my perspective, if someone was telling me that we shouldn't eat red meat anymore and their way of doing it is insulting my child or doing something personally and going crazy is incorrect, right? So it's how do we move the needle without bashing other people, being disrespectful, It's interesting.
Absolutely. And it is more important now more than ever. As you said, there's a lot of propaganda out there, anti-meat propaganda. So
it's deep. It's very deep. And 89% of the farms are individually owned. These cattle and these meat processes are not these huge mass, like meat markets. It's not it's not what exists.
Yeah, it's definitely out there differently than what the reality is. The message
Right.
is out there. So just moving back to your baby for a minute, which
Yeah.
again, congratulations, amazing. Just curious, because also in your last interview with Dr. Baker, you mentioned that you were considering how to move forward with her way of eating, and if you made any, just wondering, and of course,
Yep.
maybe you haven't, but if you've made any more decisions about how you'll be introducing solids and which solids.
Yes. So I think the first thing that's going to happen is, so she's on a goat milk formula, and I've started to wean her really from the breast. So, you know, we're probably going to start to try to have number 2 in the next couple months. Gosh, I can't even believe I'm saying that, but it's true. Today actually is the plan. So right now she's had a little bit of bison, little pureed bison. There's a company, I think it's called Serenity, that actually does meats and fats, and it might throw a little bit of kale or something in there, and it's packaged. It is pasteurized, which isn't necessarily, you know, it's not fresh, but that's what she's starting on. And today we're going to try a little bit of liver.
Wow, that's exciting. First of all, that product sounds great. Thank you for sharing that. And congratulations on trying again soon. That's awesome. I think that's great news for you.
I can't believe I'm saying that, you guys.
It's awesome. It's just so awesome. So we'd also love to know, well, actually, there's a bunch of questions already in the chat, so I'd love to start asking you some of those.
And I really want this to be your guys' time, whatever questions I can answer for you, however I can help you. This, again, is my first women's group only, and it's very near and dear to my heart. And I, you know, messaged earlier that I'd love to help more than once. I'd love to be a part of this. I'd love to be able to help you guys because I've been at the front lines. I've seen it. And as a physician who has studied nutrition, it's valuable. What you guys are embarking on is very valuable.
That's awesome. We're actually having this meeting every Sunday, so we would love you to come anytime you want. So that'll be great. Definitely we'll follow up with that in an email after, but we would love you here anytime. So thank you. So one of the first questions is, what is your view on using supplements on the carnivore diet?
I think for women, so I think for women, it's important. I think that, you know, and I can speak for us, is that, for example, breastfeeding, we don't get a ton of zeaxanthin in the breast milk, and that's really important for the baby's eye and brain development. So what I do is, now I'm largely carnivore, and I add in certain supplements. I'll add in zeaxanthin. I do add in spirulina, which is a green powder. So the overall load is very low, but I'm getting those polyphenols and some of those antioxidants. And I know in the carnivore space, they're not big on antioxidants, but I can share with you from a female perspective what my experience has been. And things like maquia berry powder, which is a very bright Amazonian fruit, which is great for my skin. So I mix that with collagen. So in terms of supplements, that's how I would supplement, especially if you're not eating a bunch of fiber and you're planning on having a baby or breastfeeding. It's what I'm doing. And I can only speak for me, but that's, you know, and also calcium. It's hard for us women to get enough calcium on the, you know, if you're eating the way I'm doing, which is mostly ground meats and a little bit of organ meat. I don't need a ton of bones, and I don't need a ton of bone broth because I use collagen. It's just easier for me. I mean, I own my own practice. I have a baby, quote, second baby, my husband. Kill me for saying that. So it's a lot. I would say, you know, depending on your age, definitely calcium supplementation, vitamin D, maquia berry powder, chlorogenic acid, zeaxanthin. I supplement with omegas.
Excellent.
And then herbs if you need it. So some people were saying that they're having issues with menstruation. If you're getting really bad cramping, doing a 28-day cycle test and adding in herbals, depending on what that is. There's things like Vitex, stuff like that.
That's excellent. Thank you. That's very thorough. Actually, speaking of going backwards for a minute, some of the women were mentioning that they had such an amazing positive experience going carnivore with their periods. Did you notice any different for yourself with your cramps or anything like that?
Well, I've been largely carnivore for years. I mean, really for years. If I were to, you know, if I was being honest with myself, easily for the past 5 years, if not longer, you know.
So at first you didn't really notice any difference, or it's just so normal now that
I didn't, you know, also I was under so much stress that it wasn't, you know, I went through a period where I was amenorrheic for a long time, especially in residency, my training volume, I was working out really hard and working really long hours, up at 4 a.m., done way late into the evening. And so you get that hypothalamic pituitary stress where the body just says, you know, I'm not ready to reproduce.
Got it. That's excellent. Okay, so actually that reminds me of another question that I had before going back to the chat. Was you've worked with a lot of recovering vegan women or
I have.
or vegans. So just wondering, do you have any messages for people who are struggling to come away from veganism, or any sort of experience that you can share that might help some of our members?
If you sit down and are quiet for a moment and you ask yourself, how do you really feel? And that answer isn't great. You don't feel great. You deserve, this is it. This is our shot. This is our life. You deserve to feel well. And there's no sacrificing that. You shouldn't be sacrificing that. I really believe that. If you're doing it for health reasons, it's not the right reason. If you feel emotionally wedded to animals, you have to ask yourself, is their life worth yours? Is ultimately what I would say. Because to me, that answer is no. And then what happens is you make these decisions in midlife, and that towards the aging process, it's devastating. I mean, these decisions are devastating, and then you can't turn back the clock and say, you know, man, I didn't really care so much about that cow that I never met, and now I can't take care of my child because of it. It's not having foresight. So I would just encourage them, and it doesn't mean they have to go full carnivore, right? We're not talking about going one extreme to the other. You don't have to do that. There's going to be a group of women that emerge and feel the best that way. I know I feel the best largely eating that way, but there can be a continuum, you know.
Absolutely.
And it's worth it.
It is, like you said, we only live once, and this is it. Make your choices about your health. Yeah. Great. So another question from the chat. What is your view on chemicals such as Botox, hair dye, nails, and other things that make life fun? Are they comparable to veggie toxins?
I can't say if they're comparable, but I am not anti-Botox. I am not anti-anything cosmetic, personally.
Good. Got it. Great to know. Okay, another question from the chat. What about women that eat only muscle meat? Is there any concern about?
I've thought about this a lot, and I have done only muscle meat, and I found that I feel much better. And really, I just notice the quality of my nails and the quality of my skin and hair when I've added in collagen or organ meat. You can try it. But I found personally that when I have those added, when I have the whole animal, I feel better. I mean, listen, I've tried sweetbread. You guys know what sweetbread is?
No, what is it?
So bad. Pancreas and thymus. Are you guys all vomiting in your mouth or what?
Wow.
Like,
okay.
On the menu, this sounds great. I'm going to order it. We were at an Oregon restaurant. You know, it was a Japanese restaurant in the city. With a girl named Ashley Van Houten, who you guys should definitely have on. She's one of the she's part of Paleo Magazine, also in her own right, her own expert. She would be great. She eats a ton of organs. So anyway, the whole long story is muscle. You can trial muscle. And it's very nutrient dense. It's a nutrient dense source of vitamins and minerals. But I have found that I feel better when I add in some additional substrates.
Got it. That's great. Thank you. So another question that's come up here, which is really great. Maybe you might have some feedback. Someone would love to know about how you would approach estrogen dominance. She had an IUD attached to her uterus wall and a mess with her hormones, and would like some feedback.
Depending, so the first step that you do is you have to do an evaluation, right? When you say estrogen dominance, you should have blood work and a Dutch test so that you can see how you're metabolizing things and where the pathways are. Once you determine that, if you truly are estrogen dominant, balancing it with progesterone can be very helpful. I do bioidenticals, and I do see that they can be valuable. Also, so balancing it with a progesterone and then adding in either DIM or calcium D-glucarate to help with that. You should have a sense of what you're doing in the whole 28-day cycle.
Great, thank you. So what would be a good calcium supplement, someone's wondering?
What I recommend in my clinic is I use a supplement called Osteo One. It has vitamin D and K2 in it as well. Because really you want to protect bones as you age, especially women. And it's important. The evidence is clear that calcium is very valuable. And if you're not eating bones, sardines are disgusting. Although I used to eat them, but they're so gross. Have you guys had sardine bones?
Well, compared to that other, the sweetbreads you were mentioning, I'm not sure. Personally, I'll go with the sardines.
But no one here listening has ever, you guys never watched and you look at the menu and you're like, yeah, that totally sounds great. Sweetbread. Don't lie. It sounds good. You're not going to go, oh my God, that sounds gross. You might, but. Yeah.
I do see someone did write that she loves sweetbread in the chat. So you're not, you're not alone in wanting to try it.
Yeah.
That's great. Another question. How about women who have had complete hysterectomies with no HRT? Any special tips or advice for that?
I would really consider HRT, depending on your symptoms. Even if you've had a hysterectomy, there's still other properties that can be beneficial with estrogen and progesterone. And listen, and they might, it's valuable. Hormone replacement, there's a really great book called Estrogen Matters. I'd recommend everybody reading it. Clears up a lot of confusion and misinformation. And that book's called Estrogen Matters. It's great.
That's great. We love
you have to understand a lot of the natural supplementation. People say it's really slow medicine, and it is. And why do something that takes months to work and would have a very minimal effect when it comes to herbals when you have available to you hormone replacement? There's places for everything, but if you're at an age where you really could benefit from hormone replacement, no reason why you shouldn't do it. Now, if you're younger, you can get away with, your body has can have very robust responses to herbs and supplements for sure.
The same person is questioning is that even for cancer? Her doctor refuses, and synthetic is the question she's asking.
I don't use synthetic, so I really can't speak to that. And you definitely want to work with your physician. If you have a cancer risk, you may not be a candidate. If you have estrogen receptor positive cancer, progesterone receptor positive cancer, strong family history, it's probably not advisable. But then if you listen to someone named, so there's another GYN, Sean Tassone, who's been doing this for 20 years, he might have a different perspective. So.
Great. And just going back to calcium for a minute, another question. Yes. It's a very interesting question. Would you say that a high evidence for calcium needed in women might suggest an evolutionary slant towards dairy?
I don't know. So, it's a great, I think that's a great question. I've child-proofed my door, my wall. Hold on. I think that's a great question. I think that also something to keep in mind is that one of the things that we have to evolve the way that we're eating based on what we're doing. And with movement, we don't move as much as we used to. It's not possible. So the bones perhaps are not getting the same kind of stressors that they've had in the past. So I don't know if it's an evolutionary design for dairy. I don't know that answer. It's a really good thought. I think that's probably multifactorial. There's probably many reasons why. Maybe before we used to eat bones, we certainly used to move a lot more and create a lot more stress on our tissue than we do now.
That makes a lot of sense. another question that's come up in the chat, although we're going to open it up for video questions very shortly. Someone has said that she's going completely carnivore tomorrow. Yay, good for her. And she's been keto for 18 months. She's eating lots of protein, but has lost muscle as well as fat. So her question is, how can you calculate total macros needed to not lose muscle?
Essentially, there's some pretty good data out there. And if you look at any of Stu Phillips or the International Protein Board, I think it's the International Protein Board, they have a group of experts that have determined and done a ton of research on protein intake. So you can look there. It's a really good resource. My recommendation is 1 gram per pound body weight. So if you're 130 pounds, the minimum protein really to keep you at maintenance is about 130 grams. And that will go up depending on how much you're calorically restricted. So the less calorie intake, the higher your protein needs will be so that you don't metabolize muscle. And you've got to make sure that you're training. You have to make sure that your protein is high enough to protect that tissue and also doing some kind of resistance.
Excellent. Okay. So we have our next video question. Here you go. I'm going to unmute her. Go for it, Taryn.
Hi, Dr. Lyon.
Hi.
Super excited. I live in New York as well, so glad to have a New York doctor who's into low carb and carnivore. Quick question. I went keto a couple of years ago and I experienced a lot of hair loss. Yeah. And I've just experienced a lot of over the years, I was on birth control before that and eating a really crappy standard American diet. And so my hair took on a really dry, hay-like horrible texture. So it's kind of coming back, but it still seems like it's super thin and falling out a lot.
Yeah.
Any advice?
Yes, I see that all the time with a keto style diet. Yes. Individuals with a keto style diet, and this is why I don't recommend it in my clinic, is they go through about a month or 2 months where they feel great and then the wheels fall off, but they keep doing it because they feel like they should be doing it. And I see a change in thyroid status in almost all the patients that I've seen. So you typically get an increase in reverse T3. I don't know why that is, but it's definitely what I've seen. I've also seen an effect on hormonal balance. I've seen a decrease in hormones. I think it's a perceived stress to the body. For whatever reason, you just might not be built for keto. You might do much better on a carnivore diet, but you should definitely get a full thyroid panel, would be very beneficial. My guess is that your thyroid is a little on the lower side because you should not still be having hair loss. That shouldn't be happening.
I agree. I'm what's going on? Yeah.
So that's probably a thyroid issue. And that's something that I see commonly.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome to come see me. I'm downtown by the Bull.
I'm ready.
Charging Bull.
Amazing.
Great. So as it stands right now, it doesn't seem that we have any more questions going on. I mean, you've given us such a wealth of information. One of the things we'd love to ask you, of course, is where can we find you? If you could let everybody know. Well, we will, of course, put it up on the screen, but if you could also let us know.
So I am in New York City, and my office is across from the Charging Bull, which is really cool. And you can find me on Instagram, Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, and then Facebook, Twitter, same name. I'm happy for you guys to message me with your questions. This is very near and dear to my heart for my own experience. So if you guys have any questions right now, don't be shy to ask. This is the time to do it. And if not, you feel free to message me. I check all my DMs.
Excellent. Well, now you've raised all sorts of excitement. There's more questions now. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Ask now.
Excellent. Okay, so we next have Maria ready to chat.
Hi, Dr. Lyon. Thank you so much for giving us so much information. I'm a PA. I actually just started working in functional medicine about a year ago. So I'm just trying to make my way through the pile of garbage that is current nutritional information. But my question is actually a little bit more personal. So I think I heard you say you had 14% body fat. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. I did. Yeah, not right now.
That's incredible. I found that once I hit about 17, and this was a while back, I'm hovering around 18, 19% right now. 17% below, my periods stop. So I've heard that 15% is like the low end for women. What are your thoughts on
So
that?
clinically, I've seen, it depends on the woman. So we have a set point that our body is comfortable functioning at. For me, I used to compete. I was able to get down to 9% body fat and I stopped menstruating. So for me, my cutoff is probably 9 or 10% to stop menstruating. I see a lot of women be able to maintain good, healthy periods at 12%.
Wow.
So I think part of it is the perceived stress on the body, that hypothalamic pituitary axis. You're doing great. You're lean right now. To continue to move the needle would probably be a way to pace yourself and get someone who can really tailor in your training so that you are not overexerting yourself in a way that is causing a stress that is going to be perceived in any way that you shouldn't be fertile, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So the way in which to do that is, work with a trainer. And then, I found it's really helpful to measure your resting heart rate in the morning to see how you're doing. And if it's really high, then perhaps you were overtrained or under recovered.
Okay.
I mean, that can be very real. I do think that you can move the needle. And it's just a matter of how you do it in a way that your body is not perceiving excess stress.
Okay.
And then the other thing is, it's worthwhile to give it that push. So stress is good. You can go through a period where you push it and you go through a period where you're leaner. I mean, there's always a trade-off. But good luck. I mean, functional medicine, it's really helpful to have you here in this space. I will tell you, because I love functional medicine, right? I trained in functional medicine. There are different views. It is not unified in terms of their nutrition.
It's not. And I just want to say this real quick. Most of there are 3 other clinicians in our office, and they're all very much plant-based.
Right.
My supervising physician is more open to what I'm doing. He's very open when it comes to low carbohydrate diets, but he's still all about the plant-based low carbohydrate diets. And it drives me bananas. So I just want to say to you, thank you so much for being here. And thank you so much for sticking up for a more meat-based diet, because currently you're like my hero right now. You're a rarity in the functional medicine world, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
It really means a lot, because I do get a lot of pushback. I really do. But
you're so necessary in the space.
If we don't speak up, if we don't speak up, then we're in trouble. Then it's going to be continuing on this path that is not helpful. And I'll give you a little piece of or a clinical pearl is those patients that have failed on a largely plant-based diet continue to move the needle, and don't even call it meat-based. Just say it's protein-centric. We need to do a protein-centric approach, and if you can continue to move the needle, you will find that their autoimmune markers get better.
Yeah.
And that way it won't be as radical to your other practitioners, but it's how do we have the conversation that we can move the needle?
Yeah.
So we are now in the space of doing it in a way that is well thought out, is very valuable. Even if we might say, here, I'm going to put you on a meat-based diet and let's see what happens, which we'd love to do, right?
Right.
I would love to experiment with that. But if we say, let's just switch from it not being plant-centric and protein-centric, and then plants as a side product, begin to move them in that direction, they may see the changes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Good luck.
Thank you so much for your question, Maria. We have another question now from Shelley.
Hi.
Hi, Shelley.
Yeah, hi. I've just started recently. I listen to all kinds of content, and I've recently come across, some of your stuff, and, not realizing really how important protein is, especially like you say, for the aging population. And it is frustrating. I share things like this with people, and, no one seems to really care.
Right.
Anyway, beside that, my kind of question.
They'll care. Eventually they'll care.
Yeah.
What's going to happen is we all have aging parents, and that's where this matters the most. So the information to make people more plant-based is the single worst piece of advice I could ever give anyone. And these people are not at the bedside of people that are dying or that have broken a hip or have gone into the hospital because they're sarcopenic. No geriatrician would ever tell someone to further reduce their red meat. It's totally irresponsible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't get me
started. My question kind of is, okay, I've had 6 kids, and each time
hero. Immediately you're my hero. Oh my gosh.
My oldest is 20 and all the way down to 6. But I didn't care about what I ate when I was pregnant, and each time I got bigger each time. And my last one I was well over 200 pounds. Well, not well over, like 205 or 206. But anyway, needless to say, I was huge, and I have a lot of extra skin from that, stretch marks, the whole thing. Like, is there an easy way, like fasting? Is that supposed to?
So for skin, Charles Poliquin was a mentor of mine. I don't know if you've heard heard that name, but I would definitely Google. He has a formula for excess skin, and he uses a mix of ginkgo biloba and I think another herb, gotu kola, maybe. That's something. And that's what he says, for skin tightening. Of course, there's surgical. And in terms of stretch marks, there's a couple things. So number one, there's something called tamanu oil, which is what I used throughout my pregnancy, and I didn't get one stretch mark. Tamanu oil, it's topical, it's from a tree. It's green, whatever. There's also, so adding in collagen. And when I say collagen, not just a scoop, you're talking 2 scoops twice a day. So 4 scoops, 5 scoops. It doesn't count as a complete protein. So just be aware of that. You don't want that to be your only protein source. And needling, you can get micro needling can actually help with stretch marks too.
Okay. And is there a good collagen source?
So I use Bubs collagen. I think it's incredible. I think it's the best on the market. I know where they're sourced. I know them. The foundation, Bub, is a guy they named after. The company is named after Glenn Doherty, which was a friend of my husband's, a SEAL. And 10% of their proceeds all go to the military. It's like they donate to the military. It's incredible. So anyway, I use Bubs. That's what I'd recommend.
Okay. Thank you.
6 kids. That's incredible.
Yeah. That's awesome, yeah. Shelley. Very inspiring for all of us. And thank you for your question. Someone was just asking you, how would you add 2 scoops of collagen, and how do you spell that?
Bubs or collagen?
Bubs.
UBS. So I typically add whatever my morning drink is. I'll add 2 scoops of collagen in my morning coffee, whether it's green or hot. I do a lot of fasting. I don't do pure fasting because I'll drink coffee or I'll use green coffee. Green coffee is chilled. And this was my first experiment with gelatin. It didn't work out so well. This was my coffee with gelatin. So bad.
Charles's last name, Charles's last name, I didn't catch that. That's
Poliquin. Polquin.
Thank you.
I love the cow in the background.
Thank you.
So Charles Poliquin, he's got some stuff on skin tightening. So collagen in your coffee. And then I do some kind of coffee later on in the afternoon.
Excellent. Thank you. So we have another question, and our question now is from Sarah.
Hi, Dr. Lyon. I cannot thank you enough for especially what you share about when you were pregnant and your meat aversions. I am 10 weeks pregnant right now.
Yay!
With a surprise
Congratulations.
baby. Thank you. I've got 2 already that are 5 and 10. I'm 37 and my husband's 40, and it wasn't really in the plan, and we changed our diet around and became a lot more fertile. So.
Oh, I have goosebumps. That's incredible.
Funny how that happens, right? When you start feeding yourself the right way.
Incredible.
But and I too, just like what Shelley was sharing, is when I was pregnant with my last, I was over 200 pounds, you know, at 5'4". So I was extremely heavy. I'm 50 pounds lighter this time around, you know, eating so much better. But I've had that meat aversion for this first trimester. I was just wondering if you could talk, and this kind of goes to Leah's question too, a little bit about like what you did for protein sources while you were pregnant, or did you just kind of ride it out?
Nope. No. So the meat aversion, you know, it's interesting. I looked all this stuff up because I wanted to find out why this was happening. And they believe it's a biological response to protect the fetus. That's why strong vegetables you don't want to eat. That's why meat you get averse, because it has the potential to have pathogens in it. And this is, I think I was reading a paper from Cornell, because I was like, why is this happening?
Right.
You know, some people will say it's the HCG, but other people will say it's the innate body's response to protect the fetus. So what did I do? I haven't told anyone this, but I started eating pickled eggs, and I love them for the first, they're so good.
I'm about eggs right now.
Okay. So pickled, for whatever reason, the pickled eggs were okay. And then I got pickled quail eggs from Texas. I didn't force myself to eat red meat because, you know, after 10 months of vomiting, after the first 3 months of vomiting, and then people tell you it's going to get better, and then you go into 4 or 5 months of vomiting. After 6 months of vomiting, you just stop trying. So again, the pickled egg sources, I tried a shake. I tried protein shakes.
Yeah.
But pregnancy is interesting. You'll have to go with how you feel.
Yeah.
However, with that being said, try to make as good food choices as you could. I have not eaten carbs for the majority of my adult life, but during pregnancy, I did. It was, I ate white potato. I never did that, but I also never had any cravings. So when people say, oh, I'm pregnant, I'm craving all this stuff, I never had any cravings. Food just made me sick. Definitely take a good prenatal.
Yeah.
Omegas, zeaxanthin. Yeah, that's really what I would recommend. And then be smart. So just because you're craving a donut or craving something, it's just not.
That's been tough because, as a food addict, I'm like, my demons are there, and they're telling me this is, you're eating for 2 now,
Yep.
And with my last 2 pregnancies, I mean, it's funny that I'm so worried about this now, because with my daughter, I would literally sit down and eat an entire container of Oreos. So I feel like I've come a long way that I'm even thinking about these things. But yeah, like a white potato with Greek yogurt, full fat Greek yogurt on top has been kind of one of my go-tos, because it's kind of bland, and the sour, like you were saying with the pickled eggs. So that's definitely, I appreciate you sharing that with us so much, because I feel like I've been carnivore for a year, and like, why this food that has been so good to me and has, I've loved so much, now I can't even stand the smell of, but hopefully I'll turn the corner. But I appreciate that, hearing that, I'm not, it's not abnormal.
No, it's to protect the fetus. And I will tell you, you said something inadvertently, saying something that maybe you don't recognize, which I think for you to recognize will be invaluable. You know your weaknesses. I always tell people, it doesn't matter what your strengths are. I don't give a shit if you remember your strengths or know your strengths. You have to understand where your weak links are, because if you can exploit those weak links and you know where you fail, then you can actually progress. So you know that food is a thing for you. You know it. You know the things you're going to tell yourself to talk yourself out of it. Don't do it. You know it. Expect it. To not expect that it's going to happen and going to come up will leave you unprepared. Prepare your mind first, and then you'll be able to execute.
Awesome. That's one of the reasons I'm here every day. You all see my face here, because these little support groups that we do are invaluable for people like us that have those that chatter in the back of our head. So thank you so much, Dr. Lyon, for taking the time to talk to us.
Yes, this will definitely be helpful for so many women to come. I'm sure that will be both of you for sharing. Thank you, Sarah and Dr. Lyon, of course. So another question that's come up is from one of our members who actually had a very severe experience and illness with her hyperemesis. And so she's wondering how you dealt with it, and do you have a plan for your next pregnancy?
How did I deal with it? just knew that it was part of the process, and I didn't give it more weight than it already had. So it was I was having an experience, but I didn't tell a story around it. I was very ill. I didn't miss a day of work. I followed through on all my commitments for every talk, still traveling, still speaking. In fact, I gave my last talk to Walter Reed on August 7th before I gave birth on the, I should know the date, 16th, right? So if you feel sick, you just, it's whatever. You just go. It's, if this is your normal, then that's your normal.
Does not like it if I leave the label on it.
So sorry about that. Please continue.
Okay.
I totally hear that. But for some of us with hyperemesis, we've been hospitalized for most of our pregnancy. Like it's been very serious. Like we wouldn't have, like for me personally, I wouldn't have even been able to have like gone into work because I was so severely ill. So for people with the extremely severe level of hyperemesis, I've heard before that if you do like a mainly protein-based or mainly meat-based diet, that you can avoid some of the severity. And unfortunately, I didn't like have that knowledge during my pregnancy, but I've heard that that's something.
I've not had that experience. Typically, they say the hyperemesis is from HCG. I don't know. I mean, I can't tell you that. For me, I would see a patient, go throw up. See a patient, go throw up. It was a lot, but I didn't have to be hospitalized for it. So, sorry you went through that. But we'll see how this one goes,
Thank you. And I am hoping you all the best. This one's going to go fantastic and you're going to come out the other side like, I got this.
I really don't want to be sick for another 10 months, but it'd be worth it.
That's definitely a good way of seeing it. But we do pray you don't get sick again.
Oh, God.
So another question that's come up is a woman who's in our chat saying she's 60 years old and lifting 5 times a week. She used to do CrossFit and it was too much stress on her joints. And so she's wondering how much cardio does she need to add in?
I think you getting with a trainer who really does that programming is pretty essential. But as much movement as you could get in. So it depends on if you're going for a specific athletic goal. If you're going for a specific athletic goal, then really meeting with a trainer and having someone who is really knowledgeable. I recommend Kara Killian or Kara Lazowskis. She was on the Titan Games. She's on my Instagram. I can give you her name. She's excellent. So having a good trainer and knowing what your goals are. If your goal is to just really be fit and you're not training for something, then I really believe, this is a personal belief, the more movement you do, the better. Whether it's 20,000 steps, the more activity you can do, the better. I mean, I truly believe that.
Excellent. Thank you. Another question. First of all, I just want to add, I love your glasses and then they match your shirt. It's just too much. Your jacket, amazing. But on top of that, some women, this is always really fun, have noticed a reduction in gray hair and in aging related issues on carnivore. And the question is do you think that women should expect that?
So should they expect it? I think that everyone is so biologically individual that we can't make gross statements. But I will tell you that meat is a high nutrient dense food. B12, zinc, high bioavailable iron, selenium. I mean, you cannot go wrong.
That makes sense. Someone's also asking, and I'm not sure if this is something you can speak to, but hopefully you can, about if fasting is good and effective to activate autophagy.
It is. I mean, I believe that it is. I think that when you look at the fasting data, it could be much longer than we think. I was listening to a lecture and I think it said 3 days. our intermittent fasting might not necessarily help with autophagy, but I do it. I believe that it definitely helps with calorie control, helps with GI issues. It definitely can be used to entrain the circadian rhythm. People think of circadian rhythm as just light, but food is a big trainer of circadian rhythm. It is in part food related. So does it help with autophagy? Yes, if you're doing it maybe 3 to 5 days. However, when you think about being able to do calorie control, there's also aspects of that. Also bowel rest. If you're talking about even intermittent fasting, which is what I do on a daily basis, is intermittent fast. There are certainly benefits, and anyone that has any kind of emotional eating or eating disordered eating behavior, it can be very helpful because you're not constantly focused on food. I've seen that in my clinic, that they no longer are just obsessive.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, 3 days, it's quite something, but I from what we've learned so far, it sounds like there's definitely an impact. So thanks for clarifying that. Another question that we have is, so actually it kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier about the supplements and even with this fasting, but a lot of long-term carnivores talk about how we should just eat meat and drink water. And so some people are wondering, okay, so should I follow that? Or do you suggest we just, like, should we not worry about supplements and fasting, or should we just go with what you're suggesting?
You can try both ways. Really, you got to try it and see. Yeah, try it and see. You'll know what works best for you. You really will. And just be really truthful with yourself with what works best.
That's the best answer. Absolutely. 100%. We all need to be truthful and listen to our bodies. So,
and be consistent. So once you make a decision, be consistent. Don't jump ship. Know that that might be a weakness, that you're going to try something for 4 weeks and you might be done with it by the end of 4 weeks and then jump ship. Give it a little bit of time. Give things 8 weeks, see how you feel. And that way you'll know if it's good or bad. So for example, the woman from New York who did carnivore, you may have known that a ketogenic diet, you may have known after 2 months you didn't feel great. Really giving something, just give it 2 months. See how you do, feel. If you want to add something in, you'll know. I mean, you might not know about the calcium, but you definitely, I believe, and I would feel comfortable in my clinic as women age, I think that we need calcium.
That makes a lot of sense. Again, just really, really great advice. You've inspired so many of us already to get where we are now with all of the content you put out there and all of the sharing you've done. But this time with you was invaluable, and we would love for you to come back. So thank you so much again, Dr. Gabrielle Lyon.
Yeah.
Thank you everybody for joining us. And
thank you guys. I really appreciate all of you experimenting and doing this. It's great. And I'm really happy to be a part of it.
We're so honored. So thank you, and everybody feel fab.